everyone, and welcome to the HUD NSP Open Forum Question and Answer webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded. At this time, for opening remarks and introductions, I would like to turn the webinar over to Ms. Marcia Tonkovich. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Marcia Tonkovich with ICF, and we're glad you're all able to join us for our Open Forum Q&A. I noticed that some of the names are folks who've been with us before, so we're glad to have you back with us. And if you're new to the Open Forum Q&A, we'll talk in just a moment about how we're going to work through the questions. And please, again, feel free to ask us any NSP topic, whether it's NSP 1 or NSP 2. We're happy to walk through those with you. So before we get started, I'd like to first introduce my colleagues who will be leading the presentation. So we have David Noguera and John Laswick, and I'll start with David.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Noguera. I'm a policy analyst here at HUD, and I've been working with NSP policy since the inception of the program.
Great. And John?
Hi, I'm John Laswick, and I just flew in from Orlando. Boy, my arm's tired.
I was waiting for it.
Just so you know, Marcia, I'm also joined by Jerry Santana, another one of our policy analysts here at HUD, who will be supporting us.
Terrific. Glad to have all of you guys here. So I will serve as our moderator of the questions to try to make sure we get everybody's questions answered and keep a track of how many we have in the queue and moving through them expeditiously. So let me just give you guys the instructions on how to ask a question for us if you're new to this and you haven't participated in one of these webinars so far. So the first thing we need you to do is to go to the upper right-hand corner of your live meeting screen, and you'll see there's a green button there that says Feedback. And if you want to ask a question, you can go onto the green button and change the status from Proceed to purple, which is Question. So that will get you into the queue and let us know that you're interested in asking a question. Then what we need you to do when you're ready to ask your question is press star 1 on your phone. So the sooner you press star 1, the sooner you will get into the official queue to have the operator call on you. And so you press star 1 on your phone. That will put you in line to ask a question. And the conference operator, whose name is Brandy, will call on us in date or time order. So the first person who pressed star 1 will be asked first, and then we'll just move through the questions in time order. So if you do press star 1 and you're waiting to ask your question, it just means there's others who are there in front of you, and I'll keep a track of how many we have open and let you know how many are pending. So press star 1 to be able to ask your question. When it's your turn, Brandy will announce your name. She'll announce your name and your organization, and that'll mean your line is open, and you're free to ask your question at that point. If you're in the queue and you're waiting to ask your question and someone else asks a similar question, so you no longer want to ask your question, press star 2, and that will take you back out of the phone queue. When your question is done and you've heard your answer, or if somebody else has already gotten an answer that covers your question, please turn your dot back to green from purple so we know you no longer have a question you want to ask. So that's the procedures. I'll go ahead and put this back up throughout the presentation so that you can see the process for how to ask a question. But before we go ahead and get started, we're just going to go over a couple of the new FAQs that have been posted that we want to talk through with you. There's some common questions that we're hearing across the country, so to get the ball rolling. The first one has to do with obligating direct homeownership assistance, and we've had a series of questions about this over the last couple of question and answer sessions that we've done. So the one that is posted and the new question has to do with, if I am doing a home buyer activity where the grantee is funding acquisition and construction costs and then also wants to provide direct subsidy to the home buyer, in other words, down payment, closing cost, soft second mortgage. So we're doing both acquisition and construction, and at the end of the day when we're ready and we're done building the building, we're going to help the home buyer. How do I deal with that obligation? There's been a lot of back and forth about this concept of double dipping. So how do we track that, John and David?
Okay, I'll start off with this one. So I think the first question that you have to consider is, what type of homeownership assistance is being offered here? Because all homeownership assistance is not the same, right? In some cases, the homeownership assistance will come in the form of a principal buy-down. For example, a second mortgage or down payment assistance. But in other cases, it's considered an additional investment, such as closing costs or upfront private mortgage insurance payments that are paid. So I think if you can get past the type of homeownership assistance you're offering first, that's sort of step one. The next step is to realize that the total development costs are the total development costs. So the amount that you paid to acquire the property and rehabilitate the property, plus any other fees that may be associated with it, such as appraisal and realtor fees, that represents your total development cost. So if you are offering a principal buy down on top of those expenses, we would consider that to be a subtraction from your total development costs, because in the end, the total development costs are not changing, right? One of the ways that I've been describing this to some grantees is, think of this from the standpoint of buying a car and not having all of the proceeds up front to pay. So let's say, for example, you have 80% of the money to pay in cash, and the other 20% you're going to pay in payments over time, right? Well, that 80% represents the primary mortgage that you're going to have on this property, right? That's going to come from the bank. That's the cash that you as the grantee are going to receive at closing. The other 20% comes in the form of a note that you place on the property, and you'll receive that in the form of payments over time, or depending on how you structure that secondary financing, it could be forgivable over time. If it's 50% of the down payment assistance, it wouldn't be forgivable. It would just be sunk costs, as we call them. But I think it's important for grantees to realize that whenever you're offering a principal homeownership assistance in the form of principal buy-down, that it's never funds that are being added on. That is, of course, unless, I think as Marcia pointed out earlier in a discussion we had, the total NSP investment in the deal is less than the total homeownership contribution that you're making to the deal. Marcia, I think you had a better example than I did on that one.
Yeah, so guys, I think the key thing to think about here is this is not a black and white answer, that it does depend upon how much money you're putting into the acquisition and the construction. So let's take an example. Let's say the total development cost is $100,000. That includes acquisition and construction or rehabilitation. But NSP is only going to pay for $10,000 of that total $100,000 cost. So the balance of it is private financing or, a foundation or whatever it might be. But NSP is only $10,000 of that total development cost. But you think the home buyer really needs $30,000 of assistance because that's how much they need in order to make it affordable. And so you want to write down the purchase price, with a soft second, or you want to provide down payment assistance. In that example, what you would do is the $10,000 that's coming back to you to repay your investment in the construction at the closing table, and again, this is all a debit and a credit on the HUD 1, right? You would use that $10,000 toward the financing for the home buyer, but in that instance where you haven't put in enough money to cover the assistance you want to provide to the home buyer, you might have to draw down additional money for an additional investment, the remaining $20,000 you want to help this home buyer with. And so you might have bits and pieces coming from different sources, but it's an accounting exercise in terms of how you deal with the debit and the credit on the HUD 1. So what's important to understand here is that if you're providing 100% of the total development cost, the acquisition, the rehabilitation, with NSP money, then when it comes time to do the down payment assistance, the soft second, and all those other forms of financing for the home buyer, you're going to debit it, again, at the HUD 1 out of your total cost. If, however, you're not providing sufficient assistance, you might have an occasion where you would draw down additional money and obligate additional money in that instance. So think of it as a continuum depending upon the amount you're investing in the project. David, anything to add to that?
This is John. Yeah, I would just say that we want to stress the point that you just made, which is that any form of homeownership assistance would be included in this exclusion of being counted, except if it goes above what the NSP investment is already in the property. So whether it's principal buy-down or down payment assistance, the price of the home is still the price of the home, and the total development cost is still the total development cost. And we've just David has just gone back this week to ask again just to make sure and had this reinforced for him by our financial management director.
Okay, terrific. All right, so our next question, guys, has to do with the income limits. And that question was, where do I go to find the 120% of income limits? Because traditionally what HUD has published is the 80% limits. And so folks are wondering whether they had to back into a calculation or how they do that. And then finally, when are the new income limits available or where are they available?
Well, they are available. I can't read off. I don't know the exact website, but I think if you go right to the Resource Exchange, it was listed last week, I believe, under what's new as a separate listing that we did for the 120% of area median income. You might want to, definitely want to take a look at that because it's possible in some areas that the limits have actually gone down over the last year. I haven't reviewed it closely enough myself, but I've heard that that's a possibility.
So, folks, you don't have to calculate your income limits. There is a listing that's been published by HUD by jurisdiction for the 120% limit. Go on to the Resource Exchange, and you should be able to download it, the list with your limits for your jurisdiction. Okay, Davis-Bacon. The question on Davis-Bacon had to do with whether Davis-Bacon is triggered if the only investment that I am making with NSP funds is in the acquisition of the property, in other words, acquiring the site or acquiring the land, whatever it is, and I'm not putting any CDBG money or NSP money in this example into the construction cost.
Right. Well, this has been true for a long time in CDBG as well. Davis-Bacon is required on construction contracts over $2,000. So acquisition is not considered to be a construction contract. Neither is demolition. So if your project is if you can structure your project in such a way that you can get your money in just into the acquisition and accomplish the objective, you can do it that way. We don't recommend one way or the other. There are also limits on the number of units for NSP and CDBG. So properties with up to 7 units are exempt from Davis-Bacon, regardless of the amount of the construction contract. However, a property with 8 or more units is covered by Davis-Bacon, and even if you're doing 1 unit in a 100-unit condominium building, because the structure or the property has more than 8 or more units, it is covered. So that question kind of does continue to come up. But you could do 100 single-family homes on single-family lots and not invoke Davis-Bacon. It's not cumulative.
Great. Thank you, John. Okay, so let me remind folks how to ask a question. Again, what you want to do is change your feedback button to purple to let us know you have a question, and then go ahead and press *1 on your phone to get into the phone queue. Also, folks in the past have used the Q&A. If you look at the top of your screen, you'll see that there's a button that says Q&A and enables you to type in a question. I'll periodically monitor that as well. And so if I see any questions coming in typed, I'll pose them to John and David. So if you can't, for whatever reason, get on the phone or you're having audio issues, feel free to go ahead and type that in as well, and I will get that question over to John and David. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and open up the phone lines. So, Brandy, do we have a caller on the line?
Yes. We'll take our first question from Patricia Solmer with the City of Port St. Lucie.
Go ahead, Patricia.
Hi. I can't believe that I think we're finally on the same page as far as down payment assistance and so on.
Great.
I mulled this over all morning because I just got another response back from David, And I just was sure that I was right, and he's right, and I'm right, but we're talking different terms, I think. I believe what you're talking about that doesn't count would be more likely a subsidy, not a principal buy-down. If you reduce the cost of your home and subsidize it, usually that's a grant, not a mortgage, because it gets into problems with the first mortgage holder and so on. So I think the term subsidy rather than principal buy-down is probably what you're talking about when you say that it wouldn't count, you would be double counting it. If you're doing a principal buy-down, you're simply paying some toward the person's purchase price. You're not toying with the purchase price at all. You're simply he needs the extra money, he needs a smaller mortgage, so you're giving him maybe $20,000, $30,000, whatever, and that would be a principal reduction. So I think that's where the problem.
Okay, so let's try to clarify a couple things, right? So I think the terms that you use, subsidy, principal, buy down, refer to the same things, right? If you're offering a second mortgage, right? Let's say the purchase price is $100,000. Anything that you are offering on top of the private mortgage that buyer has already secured is with the goal of reaching $100,000. The seller, you're not going to pay more for the house than the purchase price, right?
Well, sometimes you're paying closing costs with a mortgage also. You might be paying 5% down plus closing costs.
Right. So closing costs are different. Closing costs are an additional investment. And that's why I was trying to differentiate that. I said within the homeownership assistance options, some are considered principal buy-downs, some are considered additional investment. Closing cost is an additional investment on top of the purchase price. Right.
Okay, but if you look at a HUD 1, if you've got a buyer and a seller, I'm the seller, I'm the city, and I'm going to furnish a mortgage for $20,000, and that mortgage is going to pay 5% toward the person's like a down payment assistance, and then we're going to give him his closing costs. You won't see those closing costs on my side of the HUD 1. Those closing costs are paid by the buyer. I'm simply giving him the money to pay them. So how is that an investment?
Well, from the HUD perspective, we would want to see those two different types of investments differentiated, right? The contribution to the down payment assistance should be clearly distinguished from the contribution to the closing costs. Right? The down payment is helping you get to the purchase price. Your closing costs are things like the title insurance, the transfer taxes, any other fees that are going to exceed the purchase price.
Okay, so if I give the person $30,000 in down payment and pay for his closing costs of $10,000, then I don't get to count 30.
I don't know. I still think that it's driven by how much money you have in the project. So if you've got $50,000 in the house and the total of principal buy-down, closing costs, down payment assistance, and everything else is less than $50,000, you're not expending any more money.
Because you should be netting it out from the proceeds that would be coming back to you.
Okay, we're not on the same page, but I'm fine. Thank you.
Sorry.
All right, thanks, Patricia. All right, let's go to our next question on the phone line, and then we're going to go ahead and go through some of we have about 7 written Q&As that came in as well. So, Brandy, who's our next caller?
We'll take our next question from Ann Cashmere with the City of Miami.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for my call. I was calling with regard to a down payment assistance question, possibly. We have purchased through our land bank a home that was in foreclosure. And it was new construction, so we've not had to do anything else to it other than to put in some landscaping. We decided to go ahead and to raffle off this home, so to a low-income buyer and that low-income buyers still had to meet some of our other requirements, such as, they had the $500 down, they went through the home buying counseling, and the underwriting that we normally have under our single-family program. We did find out, though, that we were going to be putting the 30-year affordability clause and restriction on the title and the deed restriction. But now the question becomes, what can I do to put on a mortgage on the property, because we want to ensure that this lady doesn't go out and just sell it the next day for, over and above, for anything.
So what did you pay? What's the total cost to you of the house?
Cost is about $175,000.
And you're going to sell it for how much?
We're not selling it. We raffled it.
You're going to give it away?
Give it away.
And are you giving her any assistance at all, any closing costs? Are you lending her anything?
That's undue enrichment.
Well, from the standpoint of, that's why I wanted to put on a mortgage.
Okay. So one of the things that David and I have been talking about the last couple of days has to do with looking at how you would record that, because given the way that you've currently set it up, that you have no direct subsidy going to the home buyer, you actually are not allowed to do recapture in this instance. You would have to have a resale provision because you don't have anything subject to recapture. You don't have a note that you can recapture. And so in order to be able to do recapture, you're going to have to rethink, I think, the way you set up the financing on this deal so that while it might have the same effect as being raffled, in other words, they're still going to get it for, a de minimis amount of money, or
it might be a forgivable loan.
Right, but you have to have some. If you want to do recapture, you do have to set up some sort of financial instrument.
The other thing I would think of is undue enrichment to the buyer, right? Typically we say that a buyer should be spending about 20 to 30% of their gross income on housing, and if you are giving a house away free and clear, then what is it, A87? Or no, I forget which OMB circular.
It's A87, David.
Okay, it comes under, but you're going to have to justify why the buyer didn't contribute anything to the house, that they're getting a free house.
Well, what we were thinking of doing was putting on a mortgage for the full amount on the house.
Mm-hmm.
The problem
is this for the very low income buyers, or
yes, this
who are
is
you targeting?
a low income buyer.
Oh, okay, 50% AMI and below.
She is probably 80. Yeah, I would say she's probably 80%.
Wow, that's a lot. Okay.
I think the issue you guys are going to have is if you want to put a mortgage on for, let's say, the 175 that it costs you to develop it, or some portion of that, but yet your sale price was $1 or whatever you did the raffle for. You're going to have a sale price that it doesn't match up with the amount of financing you provided. So in the real world, because you created debt, because you said we're going to put a mortgage on there for 175 or 170, that's really what you sold it for. You really didn't sell it for $1. Now, you could still say that the sale price was $175, but we're going to give you the entire amount of that sale price as a deferred, forgivable, not payable until sale, however you want to set that up so it functions just like a grant. But you're going to have a problem with having a sale price at $1 or $0.
No, we were thinking about putting the 175 on that, but then I was wondering if that was considered a down payment. And is that might be considered more than 50% of the of the purchase price and down payment assistance?
The $175,000?
Right.
Oh yeah, because.
Well, it's not really a down payment though. What it actually is a soft second mortgage or a mortgage.
Yeah, it's a silent mortgage.
Right.
Yeah, but it's not a second. It's the primary mortgage.
Right. So I don't think you have the problem with the 50%. Unless there's nothing that says you can't do 100% financing. There's no rule in CDBG that says you can't. If the total value is 175,
you're allowed to do that.
Yeah, so you could have a mortgage for 175.
My only concern is giving away the house and how you justify giving away the house.
Right, but if I put a mortgage on it for $175,
that's forgivable?
That's forgivable over a 30-year period of time.
Right. So the justification is that if they sell it, then what are you using, the recapture provision?
What we would do is not recapture. They have to sell it to another income-qualified person.
Oh, so you'd have a resale provision.
Resale, right.
Okay. So then they would sell it to another home buyer for free?
No, they would sell it subject to the mortgage, and they would assume that mortgage.
Right. So whatever mortgage they assume is also going to be forgivable.
Correct, for the remainder of the term of that first 30 years.
I think that helps you on the undue enrichment part too, because you're putting some limits on what they can actually take away from it. So
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they're going to walk away with the whole house unless they live there for 30 years, and then our programs, they get it.
Sure. I got you. Okay.
So I think the way you want to set this up is set the sale price at whatever you want to set it at. It doesn't have to be the full 175, but whatever you set it at, and then call whatever soft or first mortgage you're doing, forgivable, deferred, whatever it is, as mortgage financing. Don't call it a down payment.
Right. So it's forgiven over a 360-month period.
Right. And then you're not subject to the 50% limitation.
Okay. So then
Yeah. And again, if you look at the 5 different options that you have for homeownership assistance, down payment assistance is one of them. But financing is one of them as well. So don't think you have to go through down payment assistance.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that we weren't violating that 50% rule.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Let's go to our next caller, and then we'll take some of the written-in calls as well.
We'll go next to Chris Imhoff with the City of Great Falls.
Chris, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Hi, is that Great Falls, Virginia?
It's Great Falls, Montana.
Oh,
Which
Montana.
is my hometown, by the way. Go Great Falls High.
Marcia, answer this one.
So I am just a subrecipient, as opposed to like the state got the grant.
Okay.
And I have a couple of questions actually. The first one should be pretty simple. If we had a grant signed an agreement for $1.3 million to purchase 10 foreclosed homes and rehab them, and then sell them, at least 3 of them to homeowners at 30%, at below 50% AMI, and then the other ones at any range. And as we went along, we did a couple of houses and sold them and got $260,000 of program income. Does that program income impact the amount of the grant, like reduce it?
Are you an NSP 1 grantee? You're in the NSP 1 program?
Yes.
You're in luck.
She's a state recipient under NSP 1.
Right. Yeah, no, it doesn't. There's a section in the notice that says that we count that what you spend, including program income, has to equal the amount of your grant. So it doesn't count against you.
Right. But any of that program income you are receiving will have to be used for other NSP eligible activities.
So I didn't understand what you said. So the grant is for
Basically, you are trying to get to the dollar amount that you were.
We are.
Right. So you were awarded. You said 1 point something.
$3 million.
So you're awarded $1.3 million. As soon as you obligate or expend $1.3 million, whether it be from your credit line or from program income, right? You've met the obligation requirement, and you would have also met the expenditure requirement. But that doesn't mean that the additional money that you have available to you can be used for just about anything. It must still be used for other NSP eligible activities.
But it's still available to us. Is that right?
Sure.
So the way that it would work
that was my confusion.
And you should coordinate with the state to be sure of how they're doing their tracking and everything. But
well, they think they're doing it I think we're doing it right there.
Okay.
Now I have one more question. When we sell this house, we put a recapture agreement on there, and what I wanted to know was if we bought like a piece of property with a rundown home on it that needed to be demolished, and we're buying this with program income, and so we knock down the house, and then we later go ahead and use like CDBG and home money perhaps to rehab that and to do down payment assistance for the home buyer.
Right.
And then we put the recapture agreement on the home funds.
Uh-huh.
Do we have to forever keep track of that bit of NSP that purchased that lot and that home and demolished it?
We haven't decided what we're going to do at the end of the NSP program. Unlike CDBG, which just rolls over every year, NSP funding is distinct. So this is an issue that hasn't been resolved yet. In the CDBG program, you usually get funding next year, and so it just stays part of your CDBG program.
Right. And what I was hoping, because most of our the portfolio of the loans is mainly the home. And if there's some way that when we recapture home funds that it includes NSP, that would be a good thing.
Well, maybe we're not understanding your situation. So you build a house and you sell it. That's program income. You have to spend that in most cases before you draw down additional funds. But whatever happens, you use some of that money to demolish a house, and then you said rehab it. So is that actually going to be new construction or?
It would be new construction, and I'm talking about probably we would buy those lots and demolish right now while we have program income that we'd like to use and we'd like to get back to our cash.
You demolish it, you rebuild.
Later, maybe after September 10th, we rebuild with home.
That's fine. And the house that you rebuild is going to go to an NSP-eligible beneficiary.
It would.
Right, and you're going to have your affordability requirements on there.
So I think what would happen here is it's a proration situation because you've got NSP money in the form of program income in the house.
Well, that's one issue.
And
that's
you've got
one
home
issue
money
in terms of the level of income that the buyer has to qualify for.
Well, they'd have to be below 80.
Exactly.
And that's fine. But the issue
in terms of tracking the property, you wouldn't track it beyond the affordability period.
Well, that's where I get confused because if we put a recapture on there,
right?
How are you going to do the affordability period?
Well, if the property sells within that affordability period, then your tracking of the property stops because you walk away with that cash from the sale, and you go and do other NSP-eligible activities with it.
And so the affordability period isn't there anymore, right?
It's tied to the cash that you have.
Yes.
Right.
So you are sort of answering my questions, whether we're going to be stuck with the pro rata tracking that NSP forever, or if it can blend into our home.
Well, see, the nice thing about the recapture is you don't have to track the property once the property sells. You just have to track those dollars.
Yep.
But I think her question though, guys, is that she's going to have to prorate the dollars that come back because.
Oh yeah.
Because if they sell the house during the affordability period, so let's say it's a 10-year affordability period, and they sell it at year 5, and so you're going to get that money coming back in at year 5, and that money is going to actually be partly home because you put home up in there in the construction, and partly NSP because you use NSP for the acquisition demolition. And so what you'll do is when the program income comes back in, you'll prorate it, and the part that is NSP will go for NSP reuse.
Wouldn't you say they're more restrictive?
And the part of it that's home will go for home. And you're right, home might be more restrictive to VEED, but it depends on.
I don't think you'd have to go to that level of detail because the NSP funding was just used for the acquisition and demolition, right? Home funding is what's used for the so that's spent. Right, that's I guess what I consider sunk costs. So the program income would be
home
homeowner.
It seems to me that you have to demonstrate a national objective when you acquire and demolish that property. And when the national objective is affordable housing that you're constructing with other sources of funds, I think you've met the national objective. And unless you're putting NSP money into the subsidy, then I don't think you're going to have anything to track.
Good.
From an NSP perspective.
Right, because we would put home into that. And we'll do the home, our whole normal thing with the home.
Yeah.
I mean, we just recapture it over and over and over again and do it for the same purpose.
Right.
So, well, that helped a lot. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Great. Okay, let's move on to some of our written questions. So I'm going to start with one from Larry Moody, which asks about when do the 2010 income limits go into effect?
They went into effect like when they were published. It was a couple weeks ago. So I mean, they're good. As soon as you find them, they're good. I don't have that date right in front of me. Sorry.
So Larry, if you go on the website, on the NSPTA website, they are posted there, and you should be able to see them. But it is a couple of weeks ago that they were put into effect. Okay, our next written question comes from Tamara Torre, I believe. Does Davis-Bacon apply to demolition of single-family or multifamily projects under 8 units?
Davis-Bacon?
Yes. Does Davis-Bacon apply to demolition of single-family or multifamily projects under 8 units?
Demolition does not apply. Davis-Bacon does not apply to any amount of demolition.
Great. Okay, next question is from Jennifer. This one's a little bit longer. So Jennifer Hall's question is, we provide $60,000 to Habitat to acquire, rehab, and resell. Total development costs are $120,000. Habitat provides $30,000 in cash and $30,000 in donated labor and supplies. The house appraises at $100,000, so the sale price cannot exceed $100,000 because that's the market value.
Right.
Is the donated labor and materials considered part of the development cost? Let's ask that question first. Is donated labor and materials considered part of the development cost?
The materials are. I mean, you can count the materials are. We've had a harder time. Maybe, Marcia, you might know this better, but it's hard to value the labor. I mean, we recognize that it's there and everything, but
if it's an accountant, if it's an attorney, right, you can place a specific value on that. But if it's unskilled labor, we don't have a way of tracking that value.
So the materials and other things that are invoiced, maybe the electrician who invoices or the accountant can be counted, but the unskilled labor that doesn't have a way of documenting the value is not counted.
Right.
Okay, the second question from Jennifer is, either Habitat or NSP funds will not be liened in full because the TDC exceeds the appraised value. We are willing to count a portion of the $60,000 as a development subsidy so that Habitat can lien their full amount at 0% interest or 15-year loan, and the remaining lien will be an NSP lien at 0% deferred forgivable loan with an equity sharing clause at the time of sale. Can Habitat lien more than the $30,000 in cash contribution? In other words, can they lien
more than they're putting in? I think it's a legal issue.
Yeah, we
I don't
actually,
see how you do that.
Paul, there is a frequently asked question on this, and Paul reluctantly allows it only for the purposes of securing the assistance, the homeownership assistance, or whatever. It can never be.
What are you leaning though? How are you leaning something beyond?
No, this is below the sales price. So they're going to.
No, you said above the sales price, right, Marcia?
No, I believe Jennifer's question was that it was below the sale price,
sorry.
but simply above the Habitat investment.
Right. Yeah. So I think there's a way to do that. If you look on our, if you search through the FAQs, and but the lien can only exist to enforce the affordability provisions. You can't go after that because the feeling is that if it's really not present in the price that you're selling the house for, then if you enforce the lien, you would in effect be charging them more than you told them you were going to charge. So.
Okay, so one more written-in question. I know we have more that are written in that we haven't gotten to, but I want to take some phone questions. So we're going to do one more written-in one, and then we'll go over the phone again. Are recording fees an eligible expense after the closing has taken place?
Why wouldn't they be part of the HUD one?
You talk about, I guess you don't know, reimbursement or?
Yeah, I can't tell. So I think it's Sylvester Morton. So Sylvester, if you want to cue in, push *1, we'll come back to your question, and I think that Jenna DeVito may want to ask you some follow-up questions. So with that, let me move on to some of the phone questions. So Brandy, can you go ahead and take our next phone question, please?
Yep, we'll go next to Sylvester Morton with Shelby County Department of Housing.
Good timing. That was just your question.
Yes, how you doing?
Good.
Yes, on that first question on the recording fees, yes, we've gotten a couple of invoices back after the closing to record, the deed and the trust for properties that have already closed on with the NSP.
Just like administrative cost kind of things? Just charge?
Yes, most of the recording fee just to record the deeds and the trust with our registrar's office.
Right. Mm-hmm. I think that would be an activity delivery cost.
Yeah. It's just part of the expense. I guess you could put a notation in there as to why it's coming in so late, because usually those things come in at closing, but they are eligible expenses.
Okay, and I have something that's similar to that. With one of our nonprofits, we had to cancel their contract, and what we did with the properties that they had, we filed a quit claim to one of the other nonprofits. Now, would it be an eligible expense to use NSP funds to record the quitclaim deed?
Wouldn't that be a disposition?
Yeah,
well,
probably. So you're going to.
But it's not a property.
You're just going
right?
to. Well, no, it is. So you're transferring the properties from one nonprofit to another. That the one can't do it and the other one can. Is that the idea?
Yes.
Okay. And so, yeah, that would be a legitimate activity delivery cost.
Okay. And I had one more question. We've been running into a problem with the 1% discount. When we have our properties appraised, sometimes the appraised has been coming in at like $300 or $400 less, and when they make an offer for the properties, we have to reject them because of the appraised value.
Right.
Would there be a way around that?
Yeah, I mean, this is no different than if you were a private home buyer purchasing a home. Mm-hmm. In most cases, unless you have cash to put up, you're not going to pay more for the property than it's appraised at. Under NSP, it's even more restrictive because we're saying that regardless of what your initial offer was, the eligible purchase price is going to be at a minimum 1% below the appraised value.
Now, you keep in mind that you don't have to get the discount on for abandoned properties or vacant properties. It's only on foreclosed properties.
Yeah.
I mean, that might not help, but
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a problem across the country, just with people that the banks are reluctant to deal with governments, and then the government wants a discount on top of the market value. And
we've had to reject about 10 properties because the appraised value has been coming in lower than the asking price.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, there isn't much we could do there.
Right. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Good luck.
Okay, Brandy, let's go to our next caller, please.
We'll go next to Kate Bled with the State of Wisconsin Department of Commerce.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
My question has to do with program income and the use of it. I know that it has to be for NSP-eligible activities, but what I'm wondering is, given the movement of foreclosures throughout the neighborhoods in Wisconsin, what we're finding is that even in the last year, a lot of the foreclosures are no longer in the census tracts that were initially identified by our grantees. So what I'm wondering is, as we move through time, can we change the census tracts that our grantees are allowed to use their NSP program income in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And Jerry's going to talk about it.
I'm going to try. Yes, you can. You just have to submit, is it a substantial amendment?
Okay.
And with your, the census tracts that you would like to move to that have the foreclosure grade up a score. I'm sorry, in a 15-day public notice.
Okay. And then what would be our source of data for the risk assessment? Is that going to be the NSP2 data?
Well, from the NSP2 data, you can look at the foreclosure, need maps?
Right.
Right, to demonstrate that the new census tracts you're choosing are eligible.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a different set of maps, but I don't think the NSP1 maps are up there anymore, or the spreadsheets they have on.
Right. No, but we downloaded them, so we still have access to them.
Well, if you want to use those, you can use those.
No, they're really outdated.
Right.
I mean, this is a fast-moving storm, so we're finding that foreclosures are no longer happening in those census tracts, but they've moved.
We have recommended this kind of amendment just to keep up with the.
Is there any other data that you have to describe the foreclosure needs in the new areas that you want to move to?
We have had some data that was prepared by UW Extension, and that we found was very good. We've only used it as supplemental data, but if that is allowable, we could ask them to update that and use that.
You might also try talking to the Mortgage Bankers Association, because I just looked at their data yesterday, and they do have data. It's actually updated fairly recently. I think the charge for the data is de minimis, like $75 or something. Don't quote me on that, but it's something small. So you might, if you go onto their website, they have information about foreclosure data as well.
Okay. Will you all be putting out some sort of policy guidance on that to let us know what acceptable data is?
I thought we
maybe. I mean, we were just sitting here thinking that if it's, if any sort of third-party legitimate data is probably, even our NSP2 numbers are a year old now. So,
right.
I don't know. It seems like it'd be hard to criticize, HUMDA or RealtyTrack or anybody that's,
We do have some instructions up on the website that show you how to go about mapping your target areas on a GIS map. I think using Google Earth.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just a map.
Yeah, that's not going to tell you.
Yeah, that's not going to tell us the risk factor, the foreclosure percentages.
The university data is good. You might want to check with the Milwaukee office and our HUD office there and see. That'd be the ones that are going to be processing your amendment and see what they say. But at least sitting around this table, we don't see any problem with any of the sources you've mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah, what I would say is if you go back to the October 6, 2008 notice, the way we defined target areas are those that had high levels of vacancies, high levels of high-cost loans, and high levels of foreclosures.
Right.
So to the extent you can demonstrate those three factors in whatever data you submit, that should be sufficient.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks. All right, Brandy, let's go to our next caller, please.
We'll go next to Ann Cashmere with the City of Miami.
Hi, Ann.
Hi, I'm back again. I have a question on Davis-Bacon.
Okay.
I heard what you all said about Davis-Bacon doesn't apply. However, on my demolition contract that I have, it is a contract for $675,000, and it is going to be for probably 30 homes and 47 units in a multifamily complex. Is it also excluded?
Davis-Bacon does not apply to demolition.
So I'm free and clear, and I don't have to worry about that. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, there's good news for today. All right, so let's go to some of our written-in questions, and then we'll come back to the phone. So our next question comes from Rich Malloy, and it says, in the obligation webinar, there was a discussion of what constitutes obligation for home buyer assistance. when the home buyer has a commitment letter from a subrecipient or a subgrantee to purchase the home, the value of the commitment may be counted as an obligation, correct or not? So there's a commitment letter
Yes.
between the subrecipient, subgrantee, and the home buyer. Can we count that as obligated?
Yes, because you've made a commitment to a specific individual.
Yeah, except that if the amount of the assistance is less than anything else in NSP funds that have gone into the unit, it's still
Right. That first question that we started off the call today with.
right. So
The whole double
it's
dipping.
sort of a classic home buyer-driven program. Somebody goes out, joins your program, qualifies, then goes out and buys a house on their own, rehabs it, and then comes into you for a down payment or mortgage reduction, principal reduction loan. And the NSP money isn't coming in until the very end. That's okay, and you can obligate that with a commitment to a specific household. As long, but if you did the rehab and then you're putting down, you're going to do homeownership assistance on top of that. Only the homeownership assistance that exceeds the amount of the rehab would qualify.
Yeah. I think the classic example, though, is usually when they haven't bought the house yet. This is just a certificate or a commitment, and they go shopping with that commitment. Yeah. And that's perfectly fine.
And if your assistance is limited to that, then that is good. Well, we've seen that the same kind of commitment can be used for new construction when you know you're going to build a house and you have the family, but the construction is not going to start till next spring.
Right. The problem is when you don't have the family or the individual. Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. So the next written-in question comes from Ann Gibson. On March 24, 2010, a memo was issued by HUD regarding NSP and FHA financing. The city holds the NSP property in their name and will provide the assistance as principal reduction / buy down. Is principal reduction provided to home buyers by the local government considered to be an FHA cash investment?
No. This only applies to the down payment assistance, and it only applies because there were some problems on the East Coast, with some funny stuff happening when the seller was also providing down payment assistance. It doesn't apply to any of the other forms of NSP assistance that you could put into a property. So we've recommended that and it really depends, but if you're trying to lower the price at the closing table for the family and you can't pay half of the down payment for them, that maybe you could cover the closing costs, and that would be a similar amount. But the other alternative is to transfer the property to a nonprofit and then have the city or the county or whoever make the down payment assistance. My guess is that's hardly ever going to be worth the hassle. So,
From an FHA perspective, they usually use the terms down payment assistance versus seller concessions. So these principal buy downs that you're referring to would just be seller concessions, and those are eligible.
Yeah, in the case of FHA, so their minimum down payment is 3.5%, and if you're limited to half to 50% of that, that's 1.75%. So on a $100,000 mortgage, you're talking about $1,750. I mean, hopefully there's easier ways to get it in than that, but they're hamstrung by the same legislation that created the NSP program, so they can't waive that.
All right, let's go to one more written question, then we'll go back to the phone. So this next question comes from BK. Is there a website that would have a template for legal documents regarding recapture provisions?
Seems like the home.
Yeah.
You know more about this than we do, but I would think home has stuff like that up.
There are the home website at HUD, HUD.gov, does not have any sample templates for recapture provisions. However, there are any home grantee who's doing home ownership assistance would have some good documents. So I would recommend talking to your other colleagues across the country who are home recipients and asking for samples from them. The other option is to go to, if you're a local grantee, to go to NCDA or one of the other associations or NARO, or if you're a state grantee, to go to COSCA or NCSHA. They have listservs, and they can share among your colleagues and get some samples. I do not believe in the toolkits that we've been doing. There is yet a recapture sample agreement, but there might be in the future.
Right. There's got to be a million of them out there, though, just because
there are.
Home's been requiring this basically from the get-go. So.
Right. So it's a matter of networking with some of your colleagues.
Right.
Okay, so let me go to the phone. So, Brandy, who's our next phone caller, please?
We'll go next to Jennifer Olson with the state of Montana.
Hi, Jennifer.
How are you?
Great.
Hey, I have a question. We have a grantee who is looking to do, we're building rental units, and they don't want to put in phone lines, telecommunications. They would like to just have Cat5 cables and stuff like that. And I'm just wondering if there's any stipulation where, we can't allow that, or we shouldn't allow that, or anything like that. At this point, I can't find anything, but I wanted to.
Now, our rules refer to the major appliances, the stove, the refrigerator,
right.
the furnace.
You're talking about sort of basic.
Yeah, no phone line. They just want to go with the Cat5 cable and some other, satellite cables and whatnot.
Right.
More.
I would think that's really up to you. We allow you to set the rehab standards or the construction standards. So if it makes sense in your area to do that, it's probably okay.
Yeah, Jennifer, I would look to the local government is probably going to have an occupancy code of some type or they may be deferring to the state's code if there is such a thing. And sometimes the method of communication, it might be that it's part of the, you shall have a phone line. It could be part of the local code. So assuming that the local code doesn't prohibit skipping it, there's nothing in NSP rules about that topic.
My second question is, and I believe there's an FAQ on this, and I guess I just want to confirm that the 1% purchase discount does not apply to non-foreclosed houses. It just applies to foreclosed. Am I correct?
Yes. Right.
But the URA guidance for any purchase or acquisition of any house would still apply, where we would have to notify the owner of fair market value, and if they waived their appraisal, that would be correct.
Yes.
Okay. And then lastly, we are dancing around recapture a lot of the questions, and my question is actually, we were talking about it earlier with Chris. If you have that program income purchased house, so we've purchased this house with program income, NSP program income, I should say, and we're going to rehab it and resell it, and home is invested as well. I think because we're using recapture revisions, I think what I had heard is that we don't really have to track NSP beyond that because home is really providing the direct subsidy. However, so we wouldn't have that subsidy, that home subsidy, monitored for NSP purposes. But when we acquire that NSP house with NSP program income, we've purchased it and maybe demolished it, newly constructed it, or purchased it and rehabbed it. When we sell it, that dollar, that recaptured dollar that comes back is still NSP program income dollar that would have to, again, be tracked because it's recaptured. And then when we are reinvested again and again and again, obviously dwindling that amount, that's where we're monitoring our period of affordability and not necessarily the home subsidy. Am I correct?
Well, I think up to the last part, because you said that the NSP money was used for the demolition and acquisition?
Yes.
Home money was used for the reconstruction?
Well, let's say hypothetically home is used for down payment assistance or some sort of financing mechanism, and that's the subsidy that would basically be retained with the unit.
And then you would get back all the NSP money that you put in it?
Right.
When it sells? Well, I mean, I think the question about whether it stays program income is yes for the foreseeable future. I think you're probably okay just tracking the home piece if that's the only amount of actual direct subsidy.
It sounds like you missed a piece, though, because you said NSP is acquisition and demolition, right? And then home is reconstruction.
Oh, well, let's say hypothetically, I guess it's either way. I guess I'm looking at, is there a difference between the two? Let's say, for instance, I have NSP program income is acquisition and demolition. Home comes in as new construction and down payment assistance. Or is there a difference? Maybe just talk about that scenario, because is there a difference if home is only DPA and NSP program income is acquisition, demolition, and new construction?
What we've always been saying is that when you're mixing funds here, the more restrictive rules apply.
Sure.
So I don't think it'd be necessary to decipher, which dollars are attributable to NSP, which ones are attributable to home. Home is a more restrictive program. You just follow the home rules as it applies to the program income.
Sure. So I guess maybe to make a very clear question, as I was reading the policy guidance on NSP-supported home ownership that was published March last year, it says under the recapture provisions, only the direct subsidy would count towards the affordability period. And so I guess what I'm distinguishing against is, let's say, for instance, we have a home a unit that is assisted with both NSP program income and home dollars.
Right.
Any of that NSP program, or upon the sale, if any NSP dollars come back, if it's not direct subsidy, and it comes back, then that would be program income dollars that we would still need to reinvest, and then we see how we track it. Because when my initial investment occurs with my direct NSP cash funds, I have a period of affordability.
Yeah, guys, I think Jennifer's right here, because if you think about the timing of this, what's going to happen is they're going to invest the NSP funds, and then when it gets sold to the very first home buyer, so you haven't yet started the affordability period because it's just the very first buyer, they're going to get their cash back from the acquisition and the demolition and whatever else they invested. That money coming back into the state is going to be NSP program income. And then during the affordability period, I think what you guys are saying is if that home buyer sells the unit during the affordability period and money then comes back that's recaptured, you're saying follow the home rules because those are more restrictive. But I think that's different than the first cash that comes back when they finish the deal.
Right. I think that's what I was trying to get at before, maybe, Jennifer. If you're taking all the NSP money out of it, so there's no NSP funds as a direct subsidy, and only the home funds are a direct subsidy, then I think you follow the home rules. But if you leave some of it in, then we get some NSP funds in and some home funds. You still play by the more restrictive rules, but I think then you're going to end up tracking, both sources of funds if you ever get repayments. Marcia, is that how it works?
Yeah, that's exactly how it would work. So let me just recap it, Jennifer, because I think it's important to think about this at points in time. So if you put the home money in, if you put the NSP money in to acquisition, demolition, and then some part of the construction, whatever part you might pay for with NSP, and then you get repaid at the time you sell that unit to the first home buyer, to the very first person who you're going to put in that unit and income qualify and everything. If you don't get fully repaid, if you get the NSP money back but you leave some money in as a homeowner subsidy, we'll come back and talk about the proration. But the money that comes back to you at the time of that initial sale is NSP program income, and it has to follow the NSP rules like any other program income. Mm-hmm. So we're good with that transaction. Now we get to the subsequent transaction. So now we have the home buyers in the unit. You have assisted that home buyer with both NSP and with home. So in other words, you left NSP money in the deal somehow. You did a soft second, or you did you wrote down the purchase price, or whatever you did with your construction financing. If you assisted that direct home buyer with that assistance, and you also gave home money for down payment, closing cost, whatever. That's what John and I were saying. Then you're going to get into a proration situation when you're dealing with the cash that comes back when they sell it.
Right. And I guess, as I'm sitting here listening, I guess another thought comes to mind is that really the way that I understand recapture resale, that turns into program income only if we, and correct me if I'm wrong, only if we're doing assistance, home buyer assistance or rental assistance. So would that be, I guess, acquisition? Is that considered part of that substance or
any amount of NSP or home funds that you leave in it would be considered assistance. It doesn't really matter what you
initially used it on.
Right.
Right. So if for instance we have a $100,000 house that we purchased with, well, let's say that's our total development cost.